Hello and welcome back. I thought I'd jump on here and just do a little intro before we get started. This week's video is a compilation recorded over the course of about 3 or 4 months. It's a continuation of the first video where we explored functional pottery by making a slab vase. In this week's video, it's going to explore that further with the firing process, glazing, experimentation with different glazes. For those of you that are new to my channel, I teach ceramics at a nonprofit in California. This has all been recorded just on my own personal time where I'm exploring a series of work within my own art. So I hope that you enjoy and thank you for stopping by. Okay, so I waited a week, and when my piece was completely bone dry, I applied a bisque-friendly glaze. Normally you have to fire a piece twice, do bisque fire and then glaze fire, but I had this glaze available that was bisque-friendly, so I've never used it before, so it was really just kind of like a test. But I'm going to make many more of these vases. It's part of a series. So yeah, about to go check it out in the kiln, and let's see what happened. Okay, so here it is. Let's see. Oh yeah, I can get the light on there. Very shiny. It's a little more streaky than I thought it would be just because I applied it with a paintbrush. So I'm thinking what I might do is refire it, probably just bisque again because that's what the glaze can take, and pour the glaze on top to see what happens. This is a really interesting glaze because it came with like these little tiny bits of like almost like sand in it, and it was just clumps of glaze that had the iridescent elements to it. When it fired, they kind of melted out and made this almost like starry pattern, which is kind of cool, I think. When you refire a piece that's already been glazed, it has a tendency to not accept the glaze as easily because the surface just isn't as porous because you have glaze on it. So a little trick that you can do is heat it. So I have my vase right now in front of the heater, and I'm going to reapply the same glaze and just do probably 2 more coats and really try to get it thick and even and consistent. Warm, so that's good. So I'm going to do this side and then put the glaze on and then flip it and do the other side. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the ends here. I kind of like the way they look. They kind of have like an aged quality, but yeah, I'm just trying to kind of fill in these brush strokes that were made when I applied the glaze before firing it. So we'll see how it goes. So if you're interested in what kind of glaze I'm using, it's this Crystal Text series, and it's by Amico. It's a brushing glaze, fires at 05, so bisque fire. It's part of like this series of jewel colors. So here's my first coat. As you can see, these are the little bits of iron that I was talking about, and you can kind of move them around if you want. I like the randomness of it all though. Okay, so I've got the second coat on there. I'm probably gonna give it a third coat. I'm just letting the whole piece sit in front of the heater again. But I just pulled out another vase that I made last week and other parts to a vase that I'm going to put together to make vase number 3. So here's the second guy. He's a little bit shorter, and I kind of angled the bottom here just for fun. So I have the option of glazing him the same way with the Crystal Text, but I'm actually going to experiment with some other ideas I have using underglazes. So I'll still be working on the bone dry surface, and I'll be doing a bisque fire glaze. But for now, I'm going to construct a third one that'll be almost identical to that one. in the studio today and I have just finished unloading the kiln, and I had 3 pieces in there that I was kind of experimenting with. The first was my initial pot in this series, and I'm really happy with the results. The glaze ran beautifully. There are no streaks in it. The little bits in there of iron have completely melted down and just create this really beautiful sheen. It's very sparkly, especially out in the sunlight. It's super glossy, which I wasn't totally anticipating. But you know, I guess that's just part of the glaze. It's just very, very glossy, but I am just in love with these little turquoise bits and the gold. So moving on to my next pieces, I bisque fired 2 pieces that I had applied an underglaze to. Here's the first one. And the underglaze is very matte. And so I'm gonna dip it in clear and just kind of make the colors pop a little bit more and get that really nice shiny glaze. And the next piece here is another design that I'm working with currently. I'm adding a little more flair to it. I'm just taking my underglaze here. I use True Flow underglaze, and I'm just taking a wooden stylus and applying a design to my piece. So after that's done, I'm gonna dip this one in clear as well, and then next week we will glaze fire and see what the final results are. I just pulled this small vase out of the kiln. It's been bisque fired, and what I've been doing through this whole series of vases is I've been applying an underglaze before bisque firing, but I thought with this one what I would do is just see how the underglaze responds to just going on bisque, and then with clear, adding the clear to it and then glaze firing it. So I also pulled out 2 pieces that are finished. They have like a splatter paint effect that I did with them, and I thought today I would do the same on the smaller piece that I just pulled out. So I've just been kind of like experimenting with different sizes of vases, and I'm pretty happy with like this half moon shape. Initially, my first pot was like almost a complete circle, if you remember from the first video, and I've decided that I prefer the half moon shape. And as far as the number, the quantity of pieces that I get, I can kind of roll out more. I can do 2 in 1 with using the same template. So I have like a circle template that I use from a bowl, and if I cut that in half, then I have 1 half moon pot and I use less clay that way, and I get a little bit, it feels like I'm getting a little bit more done because I'll just use like 2 of those circular shapes, but I'll get 2 pots. Whereas before I was using 2 of those circular shapes, rolling up my slab, you know, cutting it and measuring it and getting 1 pot. So I don't know, it all makes sense to me. But so the technique that I'm going to use today to glaze this small pot is one of those kind of fun, messy techniques where you don't have to worry about it being perfect. So materials that I'm going to use are just a variety of brushes, different sizes and stiffness. I have some that are synthetic and some that are kind of more of like a natural hair. And I'll be using just the same underglaze that I used in my other pots. It's just called Saks True Flow Underglaze. So it's kind of fun. I really like this process because you can just kind of go crazy with it. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take my brush, dip it into the underglaze, and then with my other hand, gonna kind of like tap the top of my hand holding the brush so that it splatters onto the surface. Another method you can use is take the paintbrush and kind of like fling it with your thumb, and it just kind of splatters and goes all over. So I've tried both, but I tend to like the one where I just hold the brush and then tap my hand with the other hand. You'll see in a minute. Because I have like a little bit more control and the paint doesn't go like flying all over my clothes. So I'm gonna get started with the light blue, and then after my first light blue coat, I'm gonna do the green and the orange and the purple, and then maybe go back in and see where I wanna add more color. So what's happening is I'm just creating essentially like a controlled splatter. And I had started with I'm right-handed, so I started with my dominant hand holding the brush, but then I switched over to make that like the tapping hand, and I found that I had a lot more control over how much paint was being distributed to the piece. This big brush gets really messy. Okay, so here it is. I've got one side done. I'm gonna let it dry before doing the others. And I had a lot of fun with this one. The other ones I kind of was a little bit more controlled and looking for more of like different dot shapes, but I enjoyed kind of like exploring the mark making in this one, and I had a lot of fun splattering the green down at the end. So that about does it for today. I'm gonna let that dry, and I feel pretty good about the experimentation I've done so far with these slab pots and the different glazes. My plan is to just continue going with this series and eventually get into slip casting once I come up with a form that I think will be a good one to have a continuation of. So stay tuned and maybe we'll jump into that world as well. Thanks for watching.